No, I could.
Appreciate everyone joining us for Coach Franklin's weekly press conference. We'll start with an opening statement from Coach, and then we'll open it up to questions. Coach?
Just briefly, happy Halloween, everybody. We had our annual Halloween party at the office last night. I shouldn't say party. It's like, what is it, like?
Trick or treat.
35 minutes of all the families and all the kids kind of walk around from office to office and get candy, which has been awesome. And then we go to training table, but that was great. Appreciate you guys coming out like always. Kind of get into the summary of the Indiana game. Turnover battle we've won. That's been probably the most consistent storyline of the year, and something that I take a lot of pride in, and I think we've done a really good job of that. Explosive play battle. Indiana won that. Our defense did reach their goal. Offense did not. Third down battle, we won that. Sack battle, we won that. Drive start battle, we won that. Penalties, we did not win that. Some more summary of the game. When you talk about players of the game, on offense was Katron Allen. On defense was Dennis Sutton. And on special teams was Tyler Warren. Just kind of want to say this and be clear about this. Obviously stats play a factor in this for us in our winning grades each week, but really it's about how they grade. Had a player talk to me this week about, how the staffs do it. The offensive staff does it. The defensive staff does it separate. I'm not involved in that, but you got to be productive, but you also got to have a winning grade and feel like let the stats alone, play winning football from a coach's grade perspective. From a D squad perspective, on offense we had Golden Achumba and Emil Davis. On defense, Jace Tuddy and Jake Wilson. Jace Tuddy and Jake Wilson have really been awesome all year long. And then Finn Furmanek, local guys doing a really good job for us on special teams. Just a few last points, the positives. Obviously we won, and I thought we were resilient. I think right now our special teams over the last couple of weeks is really playing well, and I think it starts with our specialists, Gabe, Riley, Dzansky, Felkins, and I would throw Hardy obviously in that as well. I think that group is really playing much more consistent and making plays. Hardy's a weapon for us right now. I thought as a team we made plays when it mattered most, and then we won the middle 8. That was an important stat in that game as well. Opportunities for growth. We're tackling too high. We need to wrap and consistently wrap and tackle lower. And then we got to protect the football from a decision-making standpoint and from a fundamental standpoint. And you kind of get into Maryland. Obviously, I got a lot of history with the university. I was there, I think, for 8 years. It was kind of my first big break in the profession. So I got a tremendous respect for the university as a whole and the athletic department. Was there for a long time, two different times. Was with Coach Loxley. Got a lot of respect for him and what he's been able to do throughout his career. We were at the University of Maryland, I think, from 2000 to 2002 together, I think 3 years, if I'm remembering that correctly. When you kind of break them down on offense, another guy that we're familiar with is Josh Gaddis. Josh, we were together, I think, for 6 years. We hired Josh from Western Michigan at Vanderbilt. We were there 3 years, and then 3 years at Penn State. So know Josh very well. Josh is running the offense, doing a great job. Their 11 personnel spread team. Guys that we have respect for is obviously their quarterback, wide receivers, number 6 and number 1, Ja'Shawn Jones and Caden Prather. And then the running back, Roman Hemby, we got respect for those guys. There's other guys as well, obviously, but it really kind of runs through their quarterback who's been playing there and been productive, owns every record that the university has. Defensively, Brian Williams. I've known Brian for a long time. He's done a really good job. at Maryland and really throughout his career. We got to know Brian when we were at Vanderbilt. We recruited a young man by the name of Jakari Thomas out of Godby High School. And Brian was the defensive coordinator at the time at Godby High School in Florida. Guys that we've been impressed with is number 11, Ruben Hippolyte, their middle linebacker. Their linebacker, number 1, Jayshon Barnham. As you guys know, we recruited Jayshon very heavily. Got a lot of respect for him and his family. And then safety number 2, Bo Braid, has done a really good job and been playing them for a long time and been playing for them for a long time. James Thomas, their special teams coordinator. I don't know him very well, but Braden Wisłowski, we've been impressed with him as a local kid who's a kickoff return guy for him and has got a touchdown on the year. So open up to questions.
Let's go to Rich Scarcella and then Mike Gross. You're on deck.
Hi, James. How are you today?
Hey, Rich, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. James, how would you evaluate your run defense, especially in the second half Saturday?
Obviously, I don't think in general on Saturday we played our best football. We've arguably been the best defense in college football. You could be a part of that argument. But I know Manny was very honest and transparent, with the defense on areas that we got to get better. That was kind of goes hand in hand with the point that I made about tackling as well. But we've obviously played better. We've obviously played better. I don't think there's any doubt about it. So, we worked on those things on Sunday. We made the corrections that needed to be made, and I think we'll be better for it.
Let's go to Mike Gross and then Donnie Collins. You're on deck.
Good afternoon, James.
Hey,
How are
Mike.
you? I love the fact that your description of the Halloween celebration included the term training table. I like it.
Yeah. We walk up there afterwards. I took my costume off because I didn't think that would go over well, or it would go over too well. But yeah, then we always go up to dinner. Monday night is family night anyway, from a dinner perspective. So it just kind of fits our normal routine.
But that wasn't my question.
I was hoping it was.
You said on Saturday, any win this is obviously true. Any win is a good win, and it's hard to win. At the same time, we've heard you say that you can't allow the final score to sort of distract you from the issues that the team might have. Either way, So how do you balance those two things, not only in talking to the public, but in the coaching part of it, in talking to the players?
Yeah, I think. Well, first of all, to your point, I think there was 3 teams ranked inside the top 17 that lost to unranked opponents on Saturday. So I guess your point and the point that I made is we're never going to make excuses for winning. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about, and they're all going to be different, right? They're all going to be built differently in how you get there throughout a long season. But to your point, after wins, you have to be as transparent and as honest as you can be with yourself as coaches and as players. But then also be able to have those conversations, head coach to assistants, head coach to the players, assistants and coordinators to the players. And, Devon said something in the locker room. Devon Elise, I'm really proud of. I'm going off on a different tangent here real quick, but I'm really proud of Devon in his total development really since he's been here. Maybe one of the more impressive developments that I've seen in my 13 years. I'm just so proud of him in school, in football, and as a leader. And he spoke to the team afterwards, and what he said was something that we talk about a lot. The best teams are honest teams. And you got to be willing to have those conversations with each other. It's to me, it's always at its best when it's player led, right? When the players can hold each other accountable and have real conversations with each other, whether that's at practice or in the locker room or on game days or Saturday nights. I think it's always best when it's the players. But to your point, we got to be able to peel things back and have honest conversations and look at things and check the data and see what the data is saying, because we have to win and we have to find ways to get better. But there's a lot of ways to get better throughout a season, and sometimes it takes an ugly game. Sometimes it takes a setback. You hope it doesn't, and you wish it doesn't, and you do everything you possibly can to learn after wins and not have to go through those setbacks or those challenges. But sometimes it's needed. Sometimes it's needed.
Let's go to Donnie Collins and then Johnny McGonigal.
How are you doing, James?
Hey, Donnie.
Hey, how do you evaluate the play of the offensive line the last 2 weeks? How do you think they're playing well over that time? And in what ways moving forward do you think that they could improve? Yep.
Well, I think the first thing is across the board, and specifically the last 2 weeks, we got to play better. We got to continue to get better and grow. There's no doubt about it. I think what happens specifically with the offensive line is, I don't care what offensive line you're playing or what quarterback is back there. If you're not good enough on first and second down, and you're in obvious passing situations and people can just tee off on you and twist and game, that's challenging on the best offensive line. So we got to manage it as coaches. The players have got to execute to allow us to stay ahead of the sticks. I mean, you look at some of the best sack teams in the country, that's a stat that can be skewed because they don't ever throw it. And when they do throw it, it's typically manageable third down situations. So for us, I think we have to continue to play better. We got to continue to develop depth so that when we lose guys, the next guy can go in and play at a high level. But then on top of that, we have to execute and play better on first and second down. And we got to manage the game as well. Are you going to get some third and longs and some obvious passing downs? Yes, there's no doubt about it. But obviously you don't want to live in that, and there's probably too many third and longs over the last 2 weeks that has impacted that. So it's a combination of both, if I've answered your question.
Johnny McGonigal and then Ben Jones.
Hey, James, how we doing?
And one other thing to Donnie, I'm sorry, is also obviously the opponent factors in too. All those things factor in. Sorry. Yes, sir.
All good. Yeah, you mentioned Josh Gaddis in the opening statement. I think this will be the fourth time you guys have faced him as a play caller after he spent 3 years at Michigan. Given the familiarity there, does that help at all from a game planning perspective? And how different is this Maryland offense with Josh to the one that you guys faced last year?
Yeah, I think, I get this question a lot, actually, whenever we play someone like this. And I think the answer's pretty typical, right? We know them, but they know us as well. What I would say is I think it's similar to how Maryland has been in the past, because you got to remember, I think Locks and Gaddis were together at Alabama. I think it's probably more aligned at Maryland than maybe even Michigan. Obviously the head coach has some influence on the coordinators. It's not like it's exactly the same wherever the coordinators go. But I think we have an awareness of who Josh is. I think It's similar to what Maryland has done. That's probably one of the big reasons why Locke's hired him. There's familiarity there. They don't have to change the offense and hire a new coordinator to come in. They can build on what they're currently doing. And then there's obviously things in Josh's personality and philosophy that are probably magnified, and other areas that are probably decreased based on the previous coordinators, so on and so forth. So I think it's a little bit of both. We know him, he knows us.
Let's go to Ben Jones and then Mark Wogenrich. You're on deck.
Hey, James, how's it going?
Hey, Ben.
I was curious what you feel the tenets of good quarterback development are, and if there's a difference between, or what the differences are between developing a quarterback that's maybe a more traditional pocket passer compared to maybe a guy like Trace that had the ability of his legs differently than Drew does. And is there anything that you learned from Christian's career that translates to how you're working with Drew, of a thing that maybe given another chance you would have done it differently this time, or et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so I think when you're talking about developing the quarterback, it obviously starts with footwork, and mechanics. But I've talked in great detail in the past about the mechanics. Drew's one of the few guys that I've seen that has really changed. Typically, it's a footwork game. If their feet are right, then they have the ability to be in rhythm and be accurate. So you got to spend as much time as you possibly can in the footwork. The other thing, obviously, is being able to play to that quarterback's strengths. And the challenge with that, right, is there's so many factors that go into it. The offensive line, the running backs, the tight ends, the receivers play a major part in that. When you talk about the mobility of Trace and quarterbacks we've had in the past, then that opens up a part of the playbook and also changes how people defend you. People are less bold when you have a quarterback that has the ability to beat you with their feet. They're more cautious about some of the blitzes and some of the defenses and things that they'll call against you. So all those things kind of factor into it. But I've been pleased with his development physically. I've been pleased with his development mentally. I think we got to do a better job of also helping him and making plays for him. He's got to be more consistent with some things as well. And then I think the other thing that goes into this as well is, right, there's a lot more to being the quarterback at a place like Penn State than just running the offense and managing the games. There's a lot that goes into it for the first time. I saw that with Trace. I saw that with Sean Clifford. And now obviously we're seeing that with Drew. So I'm pleased with how it's going. But there's obviously a lot of room for growth there, not just specifically with him, but the pieces around him as well. The last thing I'll say, because we've talked about this a lot, is I also think the explosive plays help. When you're able to complete a ball like we did with Keandre, the more times you can put that on tape, that affects the defense very similar to a mobile quarterback. It gives them things that they fear, that the defense fears. It's like the other day we threw a go ball, it wasn't a long one, versus cover zero to Theo. To me, if you can make a defense pay for playing an overly aggressive style, then you're going to get less of it. So the more times you can do that, the better. If you throw like a slant versus cover zero and they tackle you, even if it's for a first down, you could make the argument it was worth it because you were putting pressure on the quarterback and putting him in a tough spot. You're putting pressure on the offense and the offensive coordinator. And some of those you're going to get sacks, And if the other ones that they win go for 6 to 10 yards, then it was worth it. Where if you can beat them for a touchdown to throw it over their head, then that changes things. Very similar to how a mobile quarterback scares a defense as well. I hope that answers your question.
Let's go to Mark Rogenrich and then Frank Bodani.
Hey, James, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Do you have an update on Trey Wallace? And then in conjunction with that, how did Malik McClain play Saturday, and where is he on his developmental arc?
Yeah, so no announcements on Trey. Malik McClain, I think, is like a lot of these guys. I think I've spoke a bunch about Malik and how he's been since he's joined our program. One of the harder working guys on our team, always a smile on his face, has been very impactful on special teams and on offense in practice and in games has shown some really good signs. But it's about consistency. I think, that's really kind of always the measuring stick, not just for wide receivers, but at every position. The guys that are starting or playing significant reps are the guys that have shown the most consistency in practice and shown the most consistency in games. Sometimes I think that gets skewed for the players because they may be being consistent, but they're doing it against different competition. If you're going against Kalen King every single day at practice, that consistency is judged a little bit different compared to going against somebody else. So that factors into it as well, that the competition that they're going against. But across the board, it's about consistency, and Malik's doing some really good things, and we're excited about him. But it's about doing things in practice, and when he gets the opportunities in games, just being as consistent as possible. And that's not just Malik. That's all of us.
Our last question from Zoom is Frank Bodani.
Hey, good afternoon, James.
Hey, Frank.
I want to ask you about Deaquan Hardy. Can you expound a little bit about his uniqueness as a weapon? And he looks so good at what he's doing punt returning. How did it take 4.5 years to get to see him do that?
Yeah, fair question. Fair question.
Lastly, how close has he been to getting a shot at offense in his career ever?
So fair question about the 4.5 years, but you guys also talk like there wasn't a guy like Jahan Dotson ever at Penn State. Like the 4.5 years makes it sound even more dramatic, like we had some slug back there, So just to put that in reference in my mind, to be fair, in both directions. Yeah, I think that the hard part and the challenging part sometimes is the number one priority that when you put somebody back as a punt returner, no matter what, is got to be the consistency of catching the ball. That's got to be priority number one. Number two is obviously the ability to make explosive plays. The challenge for coaches all the time and for players is how much live do you go on special teams with a punt returner who's also our starting nickel and corner, and you go live, and then all of a sudden while you're doing the evaluation process, you lose that guy, and then the defensive coaches are upset because you lost that guy during a live period as a punt returner to evaluate him. Or you guys are saying, you lost this guy as your punt returner or as your kick returner, and now he's not available on offense or defense. So those things factor in. You just don't get that many live reps. It's almost like a quarterback who's a dual threat quarterback and he's in a competition with a guy who's not. Well, a lot of times you never get to see the dual threat quarterback's ability, that aspect of his game, unless it's live, and the quarterback doesn't go live very often. So that's the challenge. I think it's a fair question. Obviously, the way he's impacting games right now. But again, we had a guy by the name of Jahan Dotson before, and then in the past, it had been based number one on who was catching the ball most consistently in practice, and there was guys that were catching the ball more consistently at practice. But but totally fair. I get it. Is doing a great job, and we want to continue to put him in position to make plays. But I hope that was a fair answer. There was a second part to this question? Oh, on offense? Yeah. We have not done that. Again, it's not that easy. It's got to be something that you make a decision on very early on, and somebody that has the ability to learn both and do both at a high level. It's not something you can just say, okay, this week we're going to make this guy an offensive player, because if you do that, then you're probably just going to use him on the pass plays, and then everybody knows he's in for just the pass play. You lose some of that. So it's more complex than that. We have guys on defense that just play defense that have missed assignments. We have guys that are on offense that just play offense and have missed assignments, and that's limiting their ability to play more. There are too many missed assignments. So when you do both, that obviously magnifies it, and that's something you got to be working on more than just after he returns a punt for a touchdown.
Please raise your hand. We'll take a mic to you. We'll start with Mark.
James, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Obviously, going into the season, you had pretty high hopes for Trey, and that kind of bore itself out in the first couple of games. How much has his inavailability hurt your receiving core? And I'm trying to put this the right way. Are you surprised that nobody has kind of stepped up and seized the opportunity when he was out? Because the stats reflect that you have, Keandre kind of up here and everybody else stat-wise kind of further down.
Yeah, so to your point, as we've talked about a bunch, we felt like Trey and Keandre were two of the more proven commodities we had. We had Trey, then we lost Trey for a couple weeks, then we get Trey back, and then we've lost him again. So I think, yeah, there's no doubt when you have two guys at a position of two or three guys that are on the field, and you lose one of them as your proven commodity and playmakers, it no doubt has an impact. There's also been a bunch of conversation really since training camp about wanting somebody else to step up into that third role, which right now would be the second role, and has been for a good part of this season. And it goes back to kind of the point about Malik, right? We have guys that have done some really good things. It comes down to consistency. That's kind of really where we're at. It's consistency.
Bob.
Hey, James, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I wanted to ask you, how do you think Drew Shelton played against Indiana? He played, I think, quite a bit. Caden went out of the game. Can you kind of evaluate his development as a second-year player? And do you feel confident in who your swing tackle would be if you need to lean on Drew against Maryland?
Yeah, Drew, as you guys know, started a bunch of games last year, has played a ton of football for us again this year. So, yeah, we have a lot of confidence in him. Does he need to get better like they all do, and does he need to be more consistent? Yes, there's no doubt about it. But he's been very steady and very consistent since he's got here. It doesn't get too high, it doesn't get too low. Very conscientious young man. And does a really nice job. So I just think he'll continue to get better, and we're gonna need him. We're gonna need him this game. I think Caden will be available. I don't see that being an issue for this game. But we're gonna play Drew either way. So I'm pleased with his development. He needs to continue to grow and continue to get better. And be more consistent in his physicality in the run game as well as his consistency in pass pro.
Tyler?
Hey, James over here.
On the right.
Hey,
Sorry.
No, all good.
So it's weird because this speaker, I don't, yeah.
Just circling back to receiver a bit, I know you discussed kind of the top end of that, but it seemed like the rotation or the work from that group was a bit tightened up against Indiana. We didn't see Liam Clifford. We didn't see Omari Evans. We didn't see Caden Saunders. That was a little bit different. Even without Harrison Wallace on the field, were you pleased with kind of the personnel approach against Indiana, or do you feel like it's important, considering what you don't know about the receiver room yet, to see some of these guys more in game action, or does that tie back to what we're not seeing in practice? That's why we're not seeing some of these guys on Saturdays.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The two things that you guys don't get to see is practice, and we're looking for that consistency physically. We're looking for that consistency mentally, and then it's kind of back to the punt return protection conversation. Okay, this guy catches the ball the most consistently, but then there's also the playmaking part. And sometimes you got guys that make plays, but then they don't consistently catch the ball. And based on who you are, you put the value in that, right? So for us, it's that. And then the other thing, like we've talked about before, there's times where you don't understand why a guy comes out of the game, but you don't realize he's had a couple missed assignments and you don't know what his assignment is. So it's hard for you to tell with that. So I think those two things probably are the biggest factor of impacting playing time and rotation and those types of things.
In the back left, Andrew.
Hey, Coach. Depending on
And again, I think I said this to you guys the other day. I'm always trying to do everything I possibly can to answer your questions. And I think sometimes you guys think I'm avoiding the question. I'm trying to answer your questions the best I can without being divisive to my team or to my players, because we've all seen examples of coaches that have not handled that well. And whether they meant to be that way or not, that's how it comes off, and it causes problems. That's always the delicate balance. How do I answer your question without doing one of those two things? That doesn't mean that I'm not having very direct conversations with someone, but I also don't want to say something in this press conference that I haven't said to that player first or to those players first. I don't think that's the right thing to do. Sorry.
No worries, Coach. Depending on the stat,
First it was Mondays,
Yeah.
and now you got to ask a
that's okay.
question, and I go another direction.
that's okay.
So
That's
I
okay.
apologize.
It's just
You understand the numbers just, it was 1 in like 30.
Okay. Depending on the metric
Move
or the
on.
stat you look at, Maryland is maybe the most explosive offense you face this year. Given that Indiana connected on a couple deep balls, do you think Indiana found a little crack, or do you think now after reviewing tape that was kind of an isolated incident?
Well, I think a couple things. I think there's been enough evidence over the season of who we are as a defense, and specifically who we are as a pass defense. When you play man coverage, are there some things that we can do, technique and fundamental, that probably weren't executed on that play the way it should have been? Yes, but when you play man coverage as much as we do, they're going to get you from time to time. The other one was a total blown assignment. So, I think there's enough body of work of who we've been as a defense to feel very comfortable and very confident with that. You had one play where the guy made a phenomenal throw and the receiver made a great catch and run. They're going to make plays too. They're on scholarship too, right? And then the other one was a blown assignment. So, is this going to be a challenge this week for a number of reasons? No doubt about it. But it's not like you're watching the tape and saying, aha, this happened here, and we're going to capitalize on this. I would not say that. No, sir.
In the front, Audrey.
Hello. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
At this point in the season, obviously, you're a good chunk of the way into this, given Drew, all the developments on the offense, the changes, the receiving core. How would you kind of evaluate the job that Mike Yurcich has done as a play caller, given all those factors?
Yeah, again, I think when you take all those factors in, I think there's a lot to evaluate, right? The depth and the consistency at wide receiver, how we're using our tight ends, the run game and where we're at, whether they're explosive runs or not, where are we at from a production in the Big Ten in terms of stats, production, whatever it may be. In terms of points, what are we doing from a points perspective? In terms of turnovers, As you know, we've talked a ton about turnovers and explosive plays. One, I think we're doing very well. I mean, we were at one point ranked number 1 in the country in turnover ratio, which isn't just an offensive stat. I get it. It's a combination of both. But even from an offensive perspective, I think we're top 4 or 5 in the country in offensive turnovers. It's not on there, Greg. You keep looking. It's a team stat on there. I know what you're looking at. So I think you have to factor all of those things in. And I think for the most part, I feel good. Obviously, we'll dig into all these things after the season. I'm not in the business of kind of mid-season or 3/4 of the season getting into evaluations of the staff. I don't think that is appropriate. I don't think that is the right thing when we're focused on Maryland this week. But again, when you take all the things into consideration, there's some metrics that we feel really good about and that you guys say nice things about, and there's some metrics that aren't, that we have to continue to work on.
2 more questions. Jared on the left.
And when I talk about metrics, it's always metrics based on how those metrics lead to winning. It's all about winning.
Jared.
Hey, Coach Franklin.
Now again, sorry, I just want to be clear. It's not like it's just the wins and the metrics don't matter. It's a combination of the both together. Just to be totally clear. Jared, sorry, buddy.
No worries. Through 6 weeks, there were some questions about how would your team fare in the fourth quarter. Now these past 2 weeks, we've gotten to see your team both in tight games both weeks where the defense needed to make a stop and the offense needed to score. What's your thoughts on their execution in the fourth quarter so far?
Yeah, I thought that was kind of my point. I just gave a brief summary, but we made plays when it matters most. I mean, you think about the first turnover that Drew has of his career, and it's in the worst area of the field that you want it to be at a critical moment. Well, our defense didn't blink. They went in there and got a critical 3 and out at that time. And then our offense was able to respond. So I thought when it's mattered most, our guys have really stepped up. And that's really been kind of throughout the season. But to your point, specifically last week when there was some adversity and we were being challenged, and our guys were resilient is how I would describe it. Yes, sir.
Last question, John.
Hey, James.
Hey, John. I like that hoodie I told you last time. I actually went out and got one.
It's a good move. It's
just like you recommended.
I have 2 of these now.
Yeah.
One's a pullover.
Nice.
But we've talked a lot about the wide receivers and the potential of not having Trey Wallace. If you don't have Trey Wallace, do you feel like you're in a spot where you can trust a second wide receiver, or where you have to make more schematic changes, maybe more 13 personnel, more 2 running back sets?
No, it's funny you brought that up. I said this to the guys on Saturday before the game, and I said this specifically to the offense, but I said it really to the whole team. I have total belief of everybody's ability in that locker room and in the Lash building. And if I didn't, they wouldn't be there, right? Every single person. Now, there's a difference between their ability and their maturity as a football player and as a young man to do it on a consistent basis. There's a difference there. And I also think there's the argument that we've talked about before, is that's also why 12 personnel is a big part of what we do and how we do, and probably will be moving forward. Why? Because our tight end room are proven commodities, have the ability to help us in the run and the pass, and I think have been pretty darn consistent. Is there things that they can do better? There's no doubt about it. I'm not saying that, but that's also part of it as well, right? As the receivers continue to become more consistent, or make plays. You never know. Saturday, the light could go on for one of them, and boom, they have their coming out party, and you guys are excited and writing positive things and saying positive things, and I'm excited coming to the press conference talking about somebody. But we do have the ability to play more 12, which also helps and can also be challenging. And there's ways to take advantage of that schematically as well.
Thank you very much.